Mario Kart. Everyone's played Mario Kart, and everyone loves them. Not all of them. I can't think of many games like Mario Kart that manage to appeal to both casual gamers and hardcore ones like myself. Every once in a while, we need a break from and sit down with our friends to play some good old family-friendly fun. Definitely not frustrating at all. Mario Kart didn't invent the kart racing formula, but it's what most veterans of the genre think of when referring to racing games for general audiences. But like anything that's successful, when people see how successful Mario Kart was, they decided to leech off its success with their own kart races. Problem is though, while most companies understand the core of Mario Kart, the quality control that goes into them is virtually the opposite. Now, there are plenty of Mario Kart clones out there that are exceptions to this rule. Crash Team Racing, for example. A game so good I actually prefer it over Mario Kart. With a fantastic 3-boost drifting system, characters constantly shouting throughout the races, and some truly imaginative shortcuts that actually require some effort to get through than simply just using a mushroom. Besides that, there's also Diddy Kong Racing, which turned out to be the best kart racer for the N64. I mean, yeah, its character roster is one that makes me go, who cares? But with impressive looking visuals for its hardware, great music, and phenomenal track design that even has you riding boats and planes, it stands out more than its competition. And even Mario's best friend Sonic got in on the action, along with other Sega characters. Granted, I've only played Transform between the 3 games made by Sumo Digital, but this is not only Sonic's best kart racer, but also one of my favorite Sonic games, period. But the thing is, most kart races that people do know about are often the ones that garnered positive reception. Most of the ones in this video are not only not as remembered fondly, but in the case that they are remembered, it's because they're Didn't matter if they tried to mimic Mario Kart's mechanics or make something slightly more original, it almost never worked. Now, I figured there was no point in making one video for each of these because you can't really go super in-depth with a racing game, so why don't we take a look at a bunch of them? And just to be clear, I'm mainly looking at kid-friendly racing games, or more so Mario Kart clones. I won't be looking at any simulation racing games or something like that. And as soon as I can, there's like, I think, 17 games to talk about. I want to go to bed. On that comment, it seems the most appropriate game to start with is Garfield Kart on the 3DS. Oh boy, a Garfield game on 3DS. That means you get to see this beautiful creature jumping out at you. I'd be disappointed if it's not in this game. Released in 2013, Garfield Kart was Artifact Studios' attempt at plastering the lasagna-loving fatso into a Mario Kart clone, but given the poor reputation that almost every other Garfield game has gotten, we can throw another one into the pile. I am aware there are other versions of this game, notably a Windows release, but I chose the 3DS version because I thought it would be funnier. When properly looking at footage for this game, you'll catch on to how it looks like a game based off the Garfield Show, a name so generic you can easily use it to describe it as the bad Garfield Show. Of course, the game is based on that show, and that would easily explain these awful visuals. Look, they're not terrible, but what this and the show have in common is a very unappealing art style. The only good thing I can say about it is that at least it's colorful, but that's about it. In fact, that's where my positives on this game end as a whole. The best word I could use to describe Garfield Kart is lazy, which I guess is appropriate given the subject matter, but I ain't laughing when playing this game. I might have praised the colors a second ago, but design-wise, this game is about as uninspired as a 1-year-old sketch. You know how Mario Kart will often have different hazards and jumps that make each track unique from each other, which will help you remember which ones you like the most or not? Garfield Kart's idea of track design is just a location from the show and designing basically the exact same type of track every time. Oh sure, it may have speed boosts and items, but design-wise, the track design screams lazy. The music is really annoying. I can't remember if any of these were part of the show, with the exception of one track that flat out plays the theme song, and yes, it does slap. But I'm certain most of them are 10-second loops with the most annoying instruments you can imagine. Characters are also dead silent, so any amount of personality from them is basically non-existent. And as you can quite clearly see, the game is definitely polished, yeah! You stack this up with Mario Kart 7 and it's laughable how these were put on the same system. The most important thing you need to nail in your kart racers, let alone racing games in general, is the driving mechanics. You can't make them too slippery or else you'll fly all over the track, but you also can't make it too rigid that turning feels like driving against a wall. Garfield Kart just sorta ignores all logic altogether. The entire game feels broken, turning is too swift and drifting is almost non-existent. You can build build up a boost, but the game doesn't seem to care because even when drifting, you can still veer to the opposite direction without a sweat. The only ounce of interest I got from playing this game were all the glitches I encountered. Stuff like walls being invisible is one thing, but how would you like to completely teleport to a bridge from the bottom? Doesn't matter how fast, slow, or properly angled your kart may be, you can easily teleport straight up the bridge as if nothing happened. Amazing. The computer racers also seem to have broken coding, as on one track Liz completely shut down and continuously drove off the track and then teleported back on. But then on another track, John decides to have rubber banding enabled and somehow makes it across half of the track without even using power-ups. You know how when you drift you often do a little hop? You don't even need the ground for that, you can do it in the air as well. Don't let the memes fool you, Garfield Kart is a mess. It's glitchy, it lacks any personality, it's laughable. So we're already off to an incredible start. What's that? What do you mean they made another one? I don't have to play that one, right? So Garfield Kart Furious Racing, and I'm glad I didn't have to call it Furious Racing, and then we'd be in real trouble. I'm disappointed to report is essentially a remake of the original game, but for modern consoles. But I am glad to say that Artifact Studios did actually take a few liberties in polishing a few of the original game's bugs. The drivers actually have voices this time, even if they're pretty damn quiet. You have every track and character unlocked from the start, but they didn't bother to add any new ones. It would have been cool for them to add characters from Garfield and Friends like Binky the Clown, but whatever. There seems to be more customization for your characters and cars, though I didn't bother to play long enough to find out. The camera is actually facing up this time, so you can see where you're going, and I suppose to give credit where it's due, the controls are a little bit better than the original, I suppose. But they're still so rigid and restrained that the experience as a whole is still nothing to write home about. I just made a car pun. In some areas, it almost feels like the turning is worse. There's so many tight corners this time. Tracks seem to be thinner than they were before, and you'll find yourself bumping into walls all the time. And if you're going at high speed, turning is basically an impossibility and feels more like a detriment than a power-up. Can we still teleport up the bridge like last time? Well, that was disappointing. The rubber banding AI still seems to be apparent, maybe even worse than before, and overall, I don't really have much else to say here that I haven't already said about the original. It looks better, it controls slightly better, and it's nice to have everything available from the start, but that's pretty much about it. But hey, at least some of the glitches are gone from the original, so I might as well finish up this race and move on to the next game. Well, I suppose if Garfield wasn't enough to satisfy your kart racing cravings, maybe we could try a kid-friendly racing game on foot. The Land Before Time Racing Adventure. Let's see who developed this game.
What the hell is that?
Alright, Vision Scope. Why do you think it was a brilliant idea to open a baby racing game with this horrifying thing? But the creepy visuals don't end there.
Hey guys, what's going on? Ooh, we're gonna run, aren't we, fun?
I'm sorry, but who signed off on these character models? Did they really think these would look appealing to kids? If I saw these as a kid, I would have been horrified. And from what I researched, the developers weren't responsible for these models because there was another Land Before Time game on PlayStation made by a different company that also had these horrific things. And to make it even funnier, guess who's voicing every character? If you don't know who it is, I'll give you a hint.
Aren't these game designers wonderful?
Even when I'm not talking about him, I still can't manage to get that godforsaken bobcat out of my life. And wow, I just spent about a minute talking about the intro. We haven't even gotten into the game itself yet. And after just playing through it, I can see why. Land Before Time Racing Adventure is boring, like insultingly boring. Which I guess sounds obvious given it's a game made for a much younger demographic, but even I've played racing games for children that are far more engaging than this. You can pick between 4 characters except Petrie for some reason. You'd think they would have given him his own flying levels to play through, but nope. Do you want to know what you do in Land Before Time Racing Adventure for the PlayStation? You run. That's it. There's 8 obstacle courses to get through. See how quickly you can make it to the end. Nothing less, and nothing more. The courses usually take about a minute to beat, so good luck beating the entire game in less than 20 minutes. There's also a racing mode that is completely based on skill, and I mean that because if you mess up at any point, you've basically lost the race, because getting back to first is almost impossible. For some reason, there are also power-ups to get, but it feels like they hardly do anything other than give you a minuscule speed boost. And every time you complete a basic obstacle course, you always get a cutscene about unlocking the harder version. These kids are willing to put themselves in harm's way just because they felt like running today.
Look, Littlefoot's boulder open, new cave track. You want to explore it?
Petrie, you are way too excited about getting into danger. I've been playing this game for like half an hour and I've got nothing to show for it. Well, there goes my sleep schedule. Seriously, what is it with this game and all the unintentional horror? First with the intro, then the character models, and then this thing showing up looking like it's ready to suck my soul out. The fact I had more to say about things that weren't a part of the game itself says a lot about the game's quality. Though given all the uncanny valley vibes this game is setting, keeping kids away was probably the best idea.
Oh, if you thought The Land Before Time was bad, wait until you see what I got for you.
Oscar, why do you look like a freak?
Oi, I look adorable. Now, eat this, asshole!
Sonic Gems Collection? Oscar, how is this a racing... Oh, I get it now. I kinda like Sonic R.
What?!
I didn't stutter. I don't think Sonic R is that bad.
Oh, you gotta be f***ing kidding me. You like having f***ing stiff controls? Okay, fine, it has good music. That's all it has, it's good! The f***ing graphics don't look that...
Oh, I'm about to set off some fireworks tonight! Sonic R was actually a last-minute entry after Sonic Extreme was abruptly cancelled, and Sega wanting a new Sonic game for the holiday season. And to make things worse, TT only had 8 months to make this. Though it's not like they didn't have assets to finish it, this was originally a different racing game altogether, so at least they had something to borrow from, and they even had Sonic Team co-developing it. Ever since its release though, Sonic R has become quite the laughingstock in the Sonic community, with many people bashing the game to a pulp, declaring it to be one of the worst Sonic games of all time as well as one of the worst racing games in general. Well, if my previous comment was anything to allude to, I don't think Sonic R is that bad at all. Don't get me wrong, it has its problems. A lot of them, actually. But after playing through both the Saturn and GameCube versions for this segment, I'm not ready to outright say it's a bad game. Dare I say it, I may even prefer this over Mario Kart 64. There's a comment you probably never heard of. Considering so many racing games had characters driving karts, the fact Sonic R has most of its characters running on foot is actually a smart choice. These characters are naturally faster on the ground anyway, so having Sonic and his friends running instead of driving was pretty cool. I mean, let's not forget, at the time, the last time these characters drove anything was Sonic Drift on the Game Gear. Definitely the right choice. There are a lot of differences to Sonic R already, but one of the main ones is that the characters actually have some substantial strengths and weaknesses. In something like Mario Kart, the only change you get between picking a character is speed, acceleration, and drift. But here, each character has their own unique abilities to help them stick out from one another. Sonic is the fastest of the starting characters, and he even has a double jump to boot. But he also has pretty poor handling, so he's not my first pick. Tails can turn better than Sonic, and he can even fly for a short period of time. Knuckles is slightly faster, and he can even glide indefinitely until you hit the ground. He's usually the character that a lot of people start with, so that makes sense. Amy sucks! Gee, first Sonic Adventure and now this? Amy needs a break. She drives a car which isn't very fast, but she can float indefinitely over water and has a short speed boost that prevents you from turning. Robotnik might actually be worse than Amy though, because he's about as slow as her, he doesn't have a speed boost, and his only ability is using 10 rings to fire projectiles at someone, which does nothing but make them startle a little bit, like boop, and then shake it off. Where are your balls, mate? Besides them, there's also 5 extra characters to unlock. Metal Sonic can jump across water and is somehow faster than Sonic. The Tails doll, generated a lot of creepypastas. F tier. There's also Metal Knuckles, who has the same abilities as regular Knuckles and can also jump across water. Egg Robo, who is somehow worse than Robotnik given he has the same shitty ability but can't hover over water. And then there's the broken mess Super Sonic. He is incredibly fast, can run across water, and has some insane drifting. Is Cleve still talking?
This is one of the absolute worst
I don't care. Anyway, so yeah, pretty cool that each character stands out on their own, right? Well, that's both a pro and a con. A pro because it's fun to experiment with all of them, but a con for the obvious unbalanced nature of it. Amy, Eggrobo, and Robotnik are so poorly designed that you will barely stand a chance against the other racers unless you know all the shortcuts. And I forgot to mention that whoever you pick will pit you against a certain group of characters, which means if you pick someone other than Supersonic in the second tier, you have to race against him. This also makes multiplayer not very appealing. Your friend may pick someone who sucks and then lose to a character you've got who is insanely broken. And what about the track design? Well, it's honestly a joke. There are only 5 tracks to race on, with each of them beginning with the letter R, I just realized. To make up for this, I suppose, each track has a vast amount of different routes and shortcuts to take. There is a reason for this though. With the exception of the final track, the other 4 are filled with collectibles to obtain, including Sonic tokens and Chaos Emeralds, which you'll either find by taking shortcuts or unlocking doors with rings. Collect 5 tokens and place 3rd or higher, and you'll be put up against one of the unlockable racers, actually unlocking them if you win. Chaos Emeralds, on the other hand, will only be secured if you place first. It's abundantly clear that these tracks were designed with collectibles in mind, because as a racing game, most of the hidden routes don't make any sense. In most cases, the hidden routes are actually slower than the main routes, and only exist just to hide something. Traveler's Tales should have designed these tracks as race tracks first, and then put collectibles there afterwards. Don't get me wrong, the novelty of finding these secrets in these tracks is a lot of fun. Heck, I've played this game multiple times just to speed run 100%ing it, but makes absolutely zero sense as a racing game. I don't play Mario Kart to find hidden coins and obscure shortcuts. I play it to, well, race against my friends. The controls are not easy to get used to. Turning can feel like a fight against your analog stick, but at least you have tight turning buttons to make them more manageable. So long as you're playing either the PC or GameCube version, because on Saturn, controls somehow feel even worse. Maybe it's just because I'm emulating it, but characters will often slip around the place and turning feels more loose. The Saturn version also doesn't have different weather conditions like the other two, and is topped off with a pathetic draw distance, even if it is manageable. Besides that, it looks incredible for the Saturn, given how hard it was to do 3D graphics for it. And how's the music? Honestly, I kinda love it. Do I think it fits in a Sonic game? Well, if we're talking lyrics, absolutely not, but the compositions are still distinctly Sonic to me. I'm sorry, but I cannot hate this game. I acknowledge it has a lot of issues I think should have been ironed out for a proper racing game, but I can't help it.
I'm done.
Good, now piss off.
This won't be the last time.
Well, since we're pretty good into this video already, let's take a look at Muppet RaceMania on the PlayStation. I'm a huge fan of the Muppets, so I am curious to see how this one plays out, especially since I've never played it until now. Ah, Traveler's Tales also made this. That should be a good sign. Well, I have to say right off the bat, this game leaves an incredible first impression, because that's gotta be the funniest loading screen I've ever seen in my life. So how's the game itself? Well, it's good, but god does it take a while to get used to. Muppet RaceMania isn't a very easy game, and most of that comes down to the track design. They're designed the same way you'd expect in a kart racer, but are riddled to the brim with different shortcuts and routes to take that require quick reactions and correct items to use. In fact, I'd say this game feels more like what Sonic R should have been. The controls feel different too, but I think it benefits the game perfectly. There's so many times where you'll need to brake and turn tight corners that knowing when it's coming can be very tricky. Not helped by the utter chaos that unfolds while you race. Items are everywhere, and the game even gives you 2 of them just to try and alleviate the beatings. There's also fruit to collect that build up your boost meter, or you can even use a special ability if it reaches max level. The item roster isn't the biggest I've seen, but considering how chaotic the game can get already, I think that was a wise choice. If you think about it, there's a lot of multitasking in this game. You not only have to win each race and complete a few side missions, but also juggle the other racers, constantly trying to ruin your day, getting the right shortcuts to activate as long as you have the right items, collecting fruit to build up your boost meter, and knowing when to brake at the right points to turn properly. Even how you start the race can be much, since it's not a simple case of pressing the X button when the right number comes up. You have to press a button combo if you want to get a good boost. I won't lie, I was a little overwhelmed at first by everything the game threw at me, but I eventually got used to it. And even though the shortcuts can be hard to access, they're so satisfying when you do get it, since they give you decent breaks from the chaos on the main track and reward you with some items to use later. The karts can also turn even when they're stationary, so I think the devs knew how hard this game could be for some and did their best to make it more accessible. It's definitely one of those games that's better to play in multiplayer, and if you're worried about how much you need to unlock since there's over 30 tracks and 20 characters to choose from, it's okay because you can enter a cheat code on the title screen to unlock everything right from the get-go, which is great for me because I've still got like 11 games to look at. Muppet RaceMania is a good time. Like I said, it's not a very easy game to start with, but it's brilliant to master. I wish it looked a little better it though, because some characters look a bit, well, dead. I'm disappointed there's not much dialogue in the races, but otherwise, it's a good game. I think Toy Story Racer is a little bit better in terms of what TT managed to develop, but this isn't a bad choice at all. And yes, it's the Muppets, so I'm gonna be a little bit biased. But I'm not gonna be biased towards this game that I've never even heard of before, Rascal Racers on the PS1. But this could be interesting. After all, this doesn't seem to be based on any pre-existing IP and seems more like an original game. And the developers of this are Miracle Designs? Okay, I've also never heard of them, but maybe we have a diamond in the rough. So let's turn the game on then. Oh, that's it? We're already on the title screen? No intro, no demo screen to clue us in on what the game's like, we're just thrust into the title screen. I guess they want us to start the game as quickly as possible. Well, the first thing I like to do when starting a game I've never played before is to look at the options menu, and 5 laps? Are they insane? I don't know how long the tracks are, so I'll just put it at 3. Time to select my character, and now I'm feeling uncomfortable. I don't like any of these character portraits. Most of them look like they're ready to skin me. And what the hell are these names? Ahab? Cadmus? Rocco? Actually, scratch that. I guess I'll go with Paulie since he looks sane. And now we're finally racing. Let's go! I'm regretting all my life choices. Rascal Racers has to be one of the most basic kart races I've ever played. It has absolutely no personality to speak of. No intro or setup for the concept is one thing, but the characters don't say a word and can't even muster up an effort to emote anything. The most they do is turn their heads, like a robot. The tracks are shamelessly copied and pasted with practically no effort to differentiate themselves from similar tracks. The items are the most generic things you can imagine, and a soundtrack so out of tune and obnoxious, you're better off playing the game on mute. And you want to know why the default lap count was 5? Because each lap in every single race takes 30 seconds. I'm not kidding. So with only 3 laps to get through, each race will take 1.5 minutes to beat, and the entire game's runtime is about 20 minutes. Sonic R had less tracks, but somehow took longer to beat with all its extra content. This game has 9 tracks that altogether takes 20 minutes. At least I can be grateful the game is short, because with these horrible controls and visuals, I was spared the worst of it. The controls are unresponsive, turning takes a literal second to do, which usually means you'll find yourself driving into walls and other races with 100% zero impact to be felt. You don't bounce off other races or anything, you're just stuck to them until the game needs to take a minute to let you drive away from them. And going back to those tracks for a minute, they're all essentially the same thing. Sure, they might look different, but I shit you not, each track is just driving down a straight line and occasionally turn for 2 seconds. There's no shortcuts, no alternate paths, no background details. Everything about this game screams lazy. Somehow lazier than Garfield Kart. He would be very proud. You can't even strategize the way you play because items can only be used unless you haven't gotten hit by something else. And you know what I find particularly funny about this racing game? No multiplayer. Zilch. And this came out in 2004, 3 years after the PS2 was well on the market. There's absolutely no point in playing Rascal Racers. It doesn't stand out in a so bad it's good kind of way, it's just atrocious. Paying money for this thing is somehow more exciting than the game itself. I need to wash the bad taste of that out of my mouth, so let's try Madagascar Kartz. You'd think that because the word Madagascar ends with the word car, a better name would have been Madagascar Racing. Yeah, I know it's a bad pun, but it's better than spelling karts with a Z. At least this game is based on a film franchise I really love, and the first 2 games based on the movies were alright, so let's see how they fared at a kart racer. By the way, I'm playing this on the Wii. You know that's a good sign. And the story is that King Julian wants to start a racing tournament. That's it. Wait, is that Shrek? Shrek's in this game? I wish I could pick you! And we also have Seth Rogen. I mean, I understand the limited amount of characters considering there were only 2 movies by the time of this game's release, but talk about the most basic character roster you can imagine. That would explain why we have 2 characters from other DreamWorks properties. So how's the game itself? It's almost close to being a competent, albeit standard racing game, but it's not quite there. Controls are rather stiff, and you'll more likely bump into walls or other races. Also, if another driver bumps into you, there's a chance they'll ram you off the track because the controls decided to uncontrol. And because this is the Wii version I'm playing, you know what that means? Force motion controls. Now yes, it does give you the choice to use a nunchuck, but if you want to jump off ramps, you need to shake the Wii remote. And you want to know which button you press to accelerate? B. The button that's often used for braking in other racing games. okay? But while the controls can be manageable if you've played the game long enough, you will not be prepared for the unbalanced item roster that throws everything at you whenever it feels like it. Just look at this clip here. Now, I get it, every kart racer needs to have some items that will majorly disrupt your goal, especially when you're in first, but this game loves to throw everything it has at you. You have no way to protect yourself, and every single item will completely throw you off course, so if you get bombarded by an item raid, you are basically screwed. This may just be me, but I'm certain there's rubber banding with the AI too, as I always had racers up my ass with no means to shake them off. The only other unique element Madagascar Kartz has is the turbo mechanic, where drifting builds up a turbo meter that you can use to boost ahead. It's a neat mechanic, I suppose, but it's not really useful against the shit that other drivers like to throw at you. Also, the character models are terrifying. Madagascar Kartz is purely intended for people who like the movies, and I suppose it does what it tries to do fine. And since I'm disappointed I couldn't play as Shrek because I didn't get far enough, I'm gonna try out Shrek Smash and Crash Racing next. The game begins with not even an intro, more like a random compilation of clips from the Shrek movies. I don't know why this is here. This has nothing to do with the game in question other than remind you you're playing a Shrek game. Look, it even ends with the logo as if we were just watching footage from the game. But where the heck was the racing, guys? I understand if this was put here to excuse the lack of a story, but that wouldn't explain the lack of gameplay footage. Then following that we get this title screen. Shrek, why are you looking at me like that? I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I actually really like this game. I mean, okay, it's not great, I wouldn't willingly go out of my way to play it again, but I'm happy to say that I had a good time with it. It's another frantic racing game like Muppet RaceMania, but it's never too punishing either. The controls are very loose, and you may find yourself running into things, but should that ever happen, or if you get hit by an item, the momentum isn't completely killed. It's the same design philosophy I loved in Double Dash, so it's cool to see another developer replicate it here. The AI do seem to rubber band a few times, slowing down if you're behind them or speeding up if you're in first, but never to a point where it becomes unfair. There's no drifting either, but given how loose the controls are, you don't need them. The track design is surprisingly cohesive, with each cup actually having a set theme in mind. One cup could see you racing through Shrek's swamp and other outdoor locations, and another you could be racing through far away and getting to the castle, or another can see you climbing the mountains to reach Dragon's Castle. The track design itself is pretty good. A couple times they'll feel like clones of ones you see in Mario Kart, but they still feel distinctly Shrek. Also, this game has some surprisingly banger music, or at least the music would be better to listen to if your characters didn't keep using the same voice lines over and over again. There are a couple of snags. The items you use are fine, but there's some serious balancing issues. Not as bad as Madagascar Kartz, but sometimes you'll get the best items even when you're in first. The fact there isn't a minimap is a little off, and sometimes the camera can't keep up with you, so you'll often be looking at a wall when making tight turns. I also didn't forget this moment. Red Riding Hood, what the hell did you do to Wolf? Top this off with a decent number of tracks, a surprisingly solid roster of characters, and fun multiplayer. Shrek Smash and Crash Racing is a keeper. It's not great, but I expected a lot worse, so good job, Shrek. I guess you're not completely incompetent at video games, just please stop looking at me like that. Hang on, I just noticed something. Shrek Smash and Crash Racing. Crash Racing. Crash Team Racing. I left out tag for a reason. With the success of Crash Team Racing, Universal Interactive saw it appropriate to make sequels and or follow-ups for next-gen hardware. The first sequel we got was Crash Nitro Kart, developed by the same company who would go on to make the Insane trilogy. Crash Nitro Kart was not that bad of a sequel, to be honest. I don't think it controls as well as CTR, but it introduced some interesting driving mechanics that would be used in the remake, and it has cutscenes that are actually better than the ones from CTR.
All too easy. Tiny's planet #1.
Tiny is my spirit animal. But 2 years after that, they made another Crash Racing game, Tag Team Racing, and this one had a lot of ambition behind it, with a hub world to explore, brand new characters, and most importantly, a brand new racing engine that was completely different. 6-year-old me was stoked for this game, and it was a magical experience when I finally opened it up in Christmas of 2006. yeah, it was a year off. Although, in hindsight, I think Pac-Man World 3 was probably the best game I got that day. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved this game as a kid, even to the point of 100%ing it so that I could do multiplayer with my sisters. But when I look back on it nowadays, yeah, I can't say it's aged too gracefully. Now, I would do a segment about the hub world, but considering this is a video about racing games, I'll just be focusing on that for today. And the funniest thing is, this means I only have to talk about the worst part of a racing game. The new mechanics are so much worse than before. The satisfying jump and drifting system from CTR is completely gone, and track design that's completely uninspired. They're usually just straight lines with a couple bends here and there. Yeah, they're shortcuts to unlock, but they don't mean anything because the risk and reward system from before is barely distinguishable. Then there's the brand new mechanic for this game, the clashing. By pressing triangle, assuming you're playing the PS2 version, your car becomes transparent and you can clash it with one of the other racers to form a superpowered vehicle and 2 weapons to take down other opponents. Each character has their own weapon and kart stats, so depending on who you clash with can make a vital difference in the races. This sounds like an interesting mechanic, but the balance of the weapons are so busted that who you pick and who you clash with results in one of the easiest racing games I've ever played. Nina and Engine in particular have extremely powerful weapons that will destroy any opponent with 2 shots at max. On top of that, if you're in the gunning seat, the CPU player you clash with drives around the track completely flawlessly, somehow escaping the bad driving mechanics the game has already. Sure, at first being able to destroy every racer around you with these weapons can be satisfying, but considering every race feels the same, the satisfaction drops faster than a Wile E. Coyote cartoon. And if CTR Nitro Fueled proved anything, it's that people just want to go back to the original racing style they loved before, instead of whatever nonsense was going on here. So, to the game's credit, maybe it can be enjoyed more for multiplayer, which I know is an argument that can be used for most of the bad games in this video, but I think it's safe to apply it here, since while it's not the most exciting racing game, it at least functions properly and doesn't feel frustrating or cheap, so there's that at least. Sheesh, that was disappointing. It always hurts to look at a game you used to love as a kid only to find out it's not as good as you remember. But on the bright side, we've got another original racing game next, XS Games. I've never heard of this company before. I guess they were one to publish games with their own names on them, and wait, Miracle Designs again? This better be an improvement over Rascal Racers. Okay, wow, they just dropped us into the title screen again without an introduction. And oh look, it's the same character roster. Great, I really needed to see these balloon heads again. XS Airboat Racing, to put it bluntly, is almost the exact same game as Rascal Racers. Same menus, same character roster, same aesthetics, except now you're riding boats instead of cars. And considering this game came out before Rascal Racers, I can't say what's worse, the fact that this is the same game I'm playing again, or the fact that Miracle Designs thought they could get away with it a second time. The terrible driving controls and whack item balancing are all here and accounted for, but now everything looks visually less interesting. There's still no multiplayer mode, and the tracks still last a minute and a half with 3 laps. It's the same game as Rascal Racers. I've got nothing else to say. So if you want to play the same terrible game again, but with boats, the option's there if you need it. And it's also a better option than the next game we're looking at, M&Ms Kart Racing for the Wii. Oh boy, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel here. This game is not only considered to be the worst kart racer of all time, but also one of the worst games period. And judging by the fact this game begins with a loading screen in Comic Sans, I have every right to be worried. Interestingly enough though, this game was only released in America. Europeans and Australians never got it. I mean, sure, I could do an import delivery, but I'd rather sail the 7 seas. We only have 5 characters to pick from, but I guess I'll go with Orange. If he's as worried about this game as I am, it only seems natural. Seeing as this is indeed a Wii game, you're forced to use a Wii remote to steer your car, except the car controls in this game are so horrible that it's actually kind of amazing. I don't know what's the best way to describe it, but it's somehow both super sensitive and also rigid at the same time. The steering seems to be just tight enough to make tight corners, but the response time is so delayed that you'll still find yourself crashing into walls all the time.
Approaching sound barrier!
Thanks, disembodied voice. I don't know how that works since I'm barely going that fast, but anyway. Adding salt to the wound, turning is not only a crapshoot, but the cars weren't coded properly to handle slopes. If you go up a ramp, your car comes to a complete crawl, and if you go downhill, the steering controls lock up. So I hope you aren't facing a wall by then, otherwise you'll be tasting concrete in your next M&Ms packet.
Approaching sound barrier!
Yeah, thanks game, you already told me that. I don't need to be reminded 3 seconds later. The track design also screams bland. The whole game is like that actually. They always consist of brown and grey colour schemes, and even when there is a little bit of colour, it's extremely muted. And is it just me, or are the graphics trying to escape the game? I'm not emulating this by the way, this is on native hardware. Oh my god, I'm not even going that fast! Why must you remind me of the same lackluster speed every 30 seconds to make the experience worse than it already is? I got so annoyed from hearing this that I ended up muting the TV. You'd want to do that anyway since the music is worthless. M&Ms Kart Racing is the worst of the worst. No other racing game I've looked at is going to compare to how bad this one can even get. On the bright side, we finally made it through the absolute worst game in this video, so at least the bar will be set slightly higher after this one. And wow, look at that, we go from one food mascot racing game to another food mascot racing game. This is Burger King PocketBike Racer for the Xbox 360. Wait, why does it only say Xbox? I was a little confused when I saw this box art, since it's shaped like a 360 game, but it only says Xbox on top. So I did a little bit of digging, and it turns out it's actually because there are 2 separate versions of this game on the same disc. This isn't an OG Xbox game that's also backward compatible on the 360. It has 2 completely separate versions for both consoles, meaning it works on both an OG Xbox and an Xbox 360. I've never seen any other Xbox 360 game do this, and apparently every Burger King game has the exact same feature. Regardless of what I'm going to say about the game itself, that is seriously an amazing idea. If the size of the game isn't big enough to fit on one disc, then you might as well put the other version in there as well. Anyway, this was yet another game that wasn't released in PAL regions, though that might be for the best because a game called Hungry Jack's Racers doesn't sound anywhere near as interesting. Gotta say I love this menu. It captures that surreal, unsettling nature of the Burger King ads, and I feel weirdly nostalgic to it despite not actually having Burger King over here. I won't lie, for a bit I was actually kind of enjoying it. It has a unique item system, the graphics at least on 360 don't look too bad, and there's just something funny about seeing these people ride these tiny little bikes throughout the race courses. That being said, the game itself starts to become rather boring when you realize that there isn't a whole lot to it. There are only 5 tracks to choose from, meaning you can finish the main mode in less than 20 minutes, but at least it's more engaging than this shit. And while the controls aren't that bad, they aren't the most responsive either. There are other modes you can do, like a battle mode that has you driving around the same racetracks hitting your opponents? Did Mario Kart 8 on Wii U rip this game off? In all fairness, Burger King Hungry Jack's PocketBike Racer Racing isn't the worst thing I've played, but there's not that much to it, and because of that, there's little to no reason to go back to it. Though considering I expected this game to be a lot worse than I thought, that's actually an accomplishment. Okay, what's next? Oh my god, another PS1 racing game. Those are starting to become a bad omen. Fine, what do we have here? Miracle Space Wait. This is the same game as XS Airboat Racing and Rascal Racers, isn't it? I'm stumped. How the hell did Miracle Designs get away with releasing the same kind of game not once, not twice, but apparently 3 times? Surprise, surprise, it's got the exact same problems as the other 2 Miracle craps, except now you're in space and every single track looks the exact same. I guess it would have taken actual effort to create tracks based on other planets. The only other thing that's worth mentioning is that there are now 8 races on the track instead of 6. I'm giving this shameless crap way too much credit for its own good. I'm so tired. I've looked at so many bad games in this video. Donkey Kong Jet Race, also known as Barrel Blast in America, was yet another obscure Donkey Kong game that purged the 2000s with its other weird stuff. Up until that point, most Donkey Kong games were developed by Rare, but after they were bought out by Microsoft in 2002, Nintendo didn't seem to know what to do with this guy. Probably the most significant entries during this decade were the Donkey Kong games on GameCube that made use of the bongos. 4 of these games used them, being the Donkey Konga trilogy and Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, the latter of which would get a re-release on the Wii, where of course you could now use the Wii Remote and Nunchuck to simulate the motion of the DK bongos. And I guess Nintendo thought, sure, this could work again, and pumped out another game built similarly to it. This game. It was developed by Pound? I don't know how to pronounce that, who, up at this point, had made 2 DK games for Nintendo's handhelds. It was actually supposed to be a GameCube game initially that obviously would have made use of the DK bongos, but since it was late 2006, Nintendo probably saw a necessity to bring this to the Wii instead. Before I get to the game itself, I need to touch base on the character roster. This game saw the return of several Donkey Kong characters who hadn't appeared for a long time. Lanky Kong, Tiny Kong, even Cranky Kong were playable in this. But I guess the developers decided to even the odds by making new Kremlin characters that match the Kongs, since this game has a rival system with each Kong having their own Kremlin to go up against. We get King K. Rool of course and a usual critter, but can you remember any of these other characters? Because I didn't. So how well does Donkey Kong Jet Race actually play? Well, I'll say this much. It offers a better workout than a good game. This game could not be any more forced with motion controls even if it tried not to. Each playable character is equipped with their own rockets and accelerate by mashing them like the DK Bongos, and since this is a Wii game, that means you need to shake the Wii Remote and Nunchuck every time you want to accelerate. That honest to God terrified me at first, that I'd need to shake them for the entire race, but turns out you don't. You only need to shake them to get a starting boost. Afterwards, your character will accelerate automatically. Just pray to God you don't get hit by something, because if you do, you get to shake them again. This even extends to steering left and right. You want to go left? Shake the nunchuck. You want to go right? Shake the Wii Remote. You want to go rest? I couldn't agree more! I get that they're trying to stimulate the feeling of using the bongos, but if you're going to do that, you might as well make the bongos a controller option. The Wii had GameCube controller inputs after all, but that doesn't matter because they go unsupported in the final game. So if you want to play this game, you better be prepared to embrace the force motion controls or else you can't play it. Even though it's only for a few seconds, constantly shaking the controller to accelerate gets annoying very quickly, especially if you get hit by an obstacle or by items. This isn't like Mario Kart where you're back in action should you get hit. Everything comes to a complete crawl in Jet Race, so I hope you enjoy shaking the controller over and over again. I should stress this, I don't mind when a game has motion controls, but when a game relies on them this much, it starts to get tiring very quickly. And I think the devs realize this because every track in this game is so automated that it feels like you're playing a modern Sonic game. You can't veer off the track, you can't go any faster than your default speed, the items are completely unremarkable. The only challenge this game bestills is shaking your controller, which if you find annoying, like me, means you'll have practically zero enjoyment from this game. Well, okay, there is one unique mechanic to this game, the wild move meter. You build this up by collecting bananas, and to unleash it, you hold the nunchuck stick in any direction and let go to get your character accelerating at a wild speed. And if you can ram into other racers or barrels, the wild move boost will continue until you run out of obstacles. For all the things this game gets wrong, this is admittedly a very satisfying mechanic. There are plenty of instances where you could build up your meter and release it at the right time to mow through everything in front of you. But considering how rarely this can happen, what are you stuck with? Yeah, that. There are some tracks that offer shortcuts, but the only challenge required is to actually find them, because getting through them is completely automated. Aside from an admittedly unique wild boost meter, I was left asking myself, what's the point of playing this? Yes, it has plenty of other game options to choose from. Yes, it has a healthy character roster. Yes, it's always nice to play as Funky Kong. But considering you're doing the exact same thing over and over again, no matter the strategy, there is no excitement to be had when playing this. And the saddest reality is, it's still better than 70% of the other games in this video. It's bad for sure, but I've played worse. That shouldn't be much of a compliment though. But there is one other game I've been saving for the end of this video. Out of every obscure kart racer I've played in my life, this is the one I'm most familiar with. It's a relic of its time, made to cash in on the success of a certain thing, and is unfortunately the one game in this video I've spent the most time with as a kid, besides Tag Team Racing. And that game is Crazy Frog Racer on the PS2. Oh yes, we finally made it to the game I've been wanting to talk about for years now. I'm sure most of you watching this video are familiar with Crazy Frog, and if not, then damn I wish I was you. This annoying thing, that was his original name actually, plagued the late 2000s with his own music videos and remixes of popular songs, which were nothing more than taking the original song and adding annoying sounds to them. Yet he somehow became extremely successful, especially with children, which is uncomfortable to think about considering this thing wasn't afraid to show his wang to everyone. And unfortunately, I was one of them. Yeah, I loved this crazy dude when I was a kid. I didn't know any better. What else was I supposed to do? And naturally, the success of Crazy Frog prompted the development of a tie-in video game, Crazy Frog Racer. There are actually a lot of neat touches to this game that I completely forgot about, like how Crazy Frog himself levitates while he's driving, a nod to the Axe Left music video. And much like PocketBike Racer, it also has a unique item system where you collect coins during each race, and collecting enough of them will allow you to use more powerful items like a speed boost or rocket launcher. Racer. It's really easy to break this game in half with these items, which is saying a lot because this game lacks a lot of polish. It's quite clear to say that these items weren't properly play tested, since stuff like the boost can easily send you flying off the track, and there's no invisible walls to keep you from getting out. And if you happen to get hit by an item while you're also going down a ramp, that can also send you off course. The controls are way too sensitive, and given the frantic speed you can reach, making an improper turn can just ruin the entire race for you. There are also too many sharp turns that expect you to react as quickly as possible, or else you'll just fall off the track again. That's a running theme in this game. No matter what you do, you will likely be sent off the course. The track design certainly isn't uninteresting, but it becomes so frustrating very quickly. The visual aesthetic of the game is also lacking. Sure, the characters don't look awful, well, minus this fucking thing. He looks like he's ready to cut my own heart out and have it for breakfast. Every single racetrack takes place in a city, and they always have dull colors like purple, brown, and so on. The track design isn't even original because they're all the exact same layout, just with different routes blocked off. You also won't be prepared for the ridiculous length that these tracks have. You know how all of Miracle Designs games have tracks that last about a minute and a half? I'd rather take that than tracks that take up to 7 minutes to beat. 7 minutes of unresponsive controls and piss poor track design for nearly each and every single race you do in Crazy Frog Racer. I was surprised to find that there's no Crazy Frog remixes in this game, and all the tracks appear to be original, although that doesn't save the names of some of them. My parts fall out. What part? Also, the character you pick can actually impact your racing skills even more, since ones like the large robot from Axel F don't have the camera adjusted to properly accommodate his size. So you'll be seeing less of what the track has to offer you and, of course, fall off the track again. And I haven't even covered the most bizarre feature in this game. Why is there a health system? I guess you go slower when your health is lower, but what's the strategy? There's no shortcuts in this game, but that would have been perfect for a risk-reward system. Like, oh, you took a shortcut, but you lost a bit of health in the process. Instead, you lose health from items in this game's unhealthy fetish for high-end roads. So again, what was the point? Crazy Frog Racer is a game that tries too many ideas at once, and none of them are executed properly. If you want to go all the way with a Crazy Frog Racing game, fine, but don't forget to include the polish next time. But maybe the developers did remember that. Maybe they went back and polished this game and found new ways to touch it up and released it as a sequel, because apparently one of them wasn't bad enough. Now, to be fair to this game, because it had about a year to give the dev team time to either polish certain mechanics or add some new modes, Crazy Frog Racer 2 is not nearly as bad as the first one. Oh, it's still bad, don't get me wrong, but I'd happily replay this one over the first one any day. For starters, we have some new characters to choose from, 3 of them coming from the Popcorn music video. Though why they didn't make the Popcorn Crazy Frog an alternate costume to the original Crazy Frog seems off to me, or maybe this is the game's horrifying confirmation that there are more than one Crazy Frog that exists in this reality, and that alone terrifies me. Oh, and if that wasn't bad enough, there are also robots that are designed after Crazy Frog. Hold the phone, why does the annoying drone get to have his willy proudly displaying for all the kids to see, but the actual Crazy Frog had his cut off instead? The tracks in this game are both better and worse at the same time. Better visually speaking, because at least you're not racing through a city every single time. You've got a football cup, snow cup, beach cup, and even the city cup has one part where you're racing through a medieval time period, so at least there's some visual variety. But they're also worse because, and I'm not joking here, every single track design-wise is ripped straight from the first game. Look at these 2 mini-maps as a comparison. They've reused the exact same tracks. So not only are all those exhaustingly long ones from the original all here and accounted for, but all have the same design problems that the first one faced that haven't gone away. Although I do feel that thanks to the improvement of the track's aesthetic and the camera, those same issues don't seem to crop up nearly as much as in the first game. I didn't fall off the tracks nearly as often as I did, though I can still recount the instances where that did happen. The weird item system from before is gone, though replaced with a more traditional item system you'd find in Mario Kart. But the items are still just as broken and still just as useless as they were before, and somehow they thought it was a good idea to bring the health bar back. But now that the coins are used for health on top of the health pickups you already had before, this makes the health system even more redundant. This time the music actually consists of remixes lyrics is from Crazy Frog, so I guess that makes the game feel distinctly more Crazy Frog, though some of these tracks are definitely not suitable for a game rated for kids. They play the I'm Too Sexy song at one point. I wish I was making that up. There's 2 new game modes to choose from, and okay, they're nothing special, but it does at least show that more effort went into this one than in the first game. Simply put, Crazy Frog Racer 2 is a better version of Crazy Frog Racer, but that's not exactly singing high praise since they're both awful and not worth playing today. And with that, we're unfortunately out of time for this video. I know there are plenty of other bad racing games I could look at, like Nicktoons Racing, DreamWorks Superstar Karts, or ATV Racers. But I'll save those for another time, because gosh darn it, with the amount of bad games I was looking at starting to pile on my sanity. So I hope you enjoyed it, but for now, I need some sleep, or else I'm gonna be crazier than the thing with the word crazy in his name. God, I hope my Lord and Savior Donkey Kong doesn't pick on me for picking apart his game. I didn't expect that. I thought it would be good, but no, it just wasn't. I don't know how he's gonna react. I'm kind of terrified now, actually.